Have you heard of ChatGPT?
I have used it. I do use it at work.
You do use it at work. So would you say it's a useful tool or it's a bit of a rubbish tool?
It is useful, but I don't rely on it as a primary source of information because
Right.
it's definitely been wrong on occasions.
On occasions, exactly. So that's one of the things about the ChatGPT that's called hallucination. Hallucination, exactly. So it's when it makes up stuff because it doesn't have that information in its database. So instead of telling you, sorry, I don't know, it's gonna just make something up and tell it to you
That
anyway.
definitely explains
Explains
some
a
of the
lot.
weird things that I've seen it tell me. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's basically what happens. It's called hallucination. Now, it's also because the ChatGPT in particular is trained on this massive amounts of data that's up until September 2021. So for the free version. So for all practical purposes, its point of reference for the world
2 years ago.
is exactly, so it's up to September 2021 and that's everything that it knows. So sometimes what happens is people think that by adding more information, it's helping it learn, like it's, training on it, but it's actually not. So yeah, so it's still, this world of reference is still kind of limited to September 2021. For the paid version, which when you get like what we call the API and the developer API, you get kind of behind the scenes on it, then you can start to work with the version that has a live connect to the internet. And then now we're talking about the GPT being kind of aware of the real world and what's
like
happening.
A real-time
Exactly.
information data set that it's
Precisely,
like.
precisely. And going back to that idea of hallucination, one of the things that people may or may not know, so do you know about the idea of temperature in ChatGPT?
I know about temperature as in like Celsius and Kelvin, but not in terms of
Yes.
ChatGPT, no.
Good one. So basically, this thing we talked about, the hallucinations?
Yeah.
ChatGPT is can go from everything to just sticking to just facts where the temperature is set to say 0. So I don't want, so it's basically telling ChatGPT, look, I don't want you pretending and making up stuff. Just give me the facts that you know. But you can kind of tweak it up all the way to move into a creative mode. And that's where
So,
it's
how
like
much
playing.
imagination you're letting it
Precisely. So for all of those purposes where we're maybe asking it to, can you write a poetry, can you write a play or whatever, that's where you want to harness into the creative side, and that's where imagination is fine.
Yeah.
But when you're using it for things like, health research, you're using it for education, things like that, probably not want it to make up stuff. So that's again
probably
something.
not a good idea for it to be making stuff up for that.
Exactly.
Okay.
So one of the things I do with my research team is I study the software teams that develop these systems.
Okay.
And
That's the open AI.
I wish, but more so the AI developers in general.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so what we've done, for instance, is we ran a survey of about 100 AI practitioners, and we wanted to know, we know that they can do the tech fine, we wanted to know what they think about the ethics of AI. Yeah. So what we found was a lot of them were kind of aware of the typical principles you'd expect in software, like software security, privacy.
Yeah.
But when it came to other things like human-centeredness and so on, not as much, right?
That's not great.
Right, exactly. So I think there's a lot that we need to understand behind the scenes of the people that are developing these systems to understand why these systems behave the way they do. So that's what my teams and I do. Another kind of piece of study we're doing right now is a bit more sort of interview based, and we get into the details of how biases creep into software, the AI.
I have a question to ask.
Yeah,
when you
go
finish
for it. No, go for it.
So I remember hearing a few years ago about this. I heard it through the news. So I was hearing it through a secondary
Yeah.
source, but it was to do with like how image-based learning models, or I can't remember what they were called, but like,
Yeah.
for women of color,
Yes.
they were like in a really, really high proportion were classifying them as men, but it was,
Yeah.
you could separate like white men and women really well. And
Right.
they said it was
Because of the training data set.
training data set which was influenced by the biases of the researchers who built it.
Researchers you built it, or it's also, so it's a bit like nuanced in that way. Most of the time, we're not talking about hackers who purposefully make these databases biased. Most of the time in the professional context is the fact that the data that you can actually get your hands on is already biased in a way because of the, if you look at, if you search for just like a scientist image, right?
You're
What are you going to find?
You're gonna find a little
Exactly.
men or people
So
who look like
this
giants.
is part of changing that. So hopefully those images go up and your image. So that already exists in society.
Starting from a biased perspective, which
And
makes
that
it
gets
more
picked up into the, exactly. So that's part of
Okay.
the problem, but there are whole sorts of other places that biases can creep in. And you use that example of the women of color. So Twitter had this problem a while ago, before Musk. Before.
There's
It
lots
has
of problems now, but let's go back to
Exactly.
2021, like check the things he does.
Exactly. So for that one, it was where, you know how the first time you see a tweet, it's a small little thumbnail of an image, if there is an image.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the software algorithm was so if there was like a person and an inanimate object, like a text or anything, it would prioritize the person in the thumbnail.
Okay.
Right? Because you can't get the whole picture. And if you just squeeze it, it's too small to see.
Yeah.
So it prioritizes something.
Okay.
So it would prioritize the human over the text. But then when it came to two humans or more humans, it would prioritize the white male person over the...
Okay.
And people noticed this.
Right.
And then Twitter obviously fixed it. But the fact that this happened means oftentimes AI developers are not even aware of the biases that are creeping into their software.
Because training in ethics and bias is not part of the core education at the moment.
That's a great segue into the other thing
okay.
that excellent point. So as an educator, teaching into the software engineering program, and we are literally developing the software engineers of tomorrow. So in our program, for instance, the Bachelor of Software Engineering program, we just last week was week 3, and the whole week we spent focusing on ethics.
Nice.
So we went over it in the lectures and in the workshop, because one of the challenges as an educator is when you talk about something like ethics, it can easily become this whole boring thing about don't do this, do that, da da da, and like everyone loses interest. So we developed a quiz, and in that quiz we put up real world examples of how things go wrong,
Yeah. Okay.
like a scenario, and then we put in up a question with like 4 options, and you couldn't just take it easy. You had to pick from one of those 4 options, and they were cleverly designed to really put that ethical dilemma in front of you.
Right. Okay.
So we would get students to think about it individually, and then we discuss as a class about, all right, what is the ideal response here? It may not be the best thing you can do, but given the circumstances, what is the best you can do? And what is definitely the worst one? We all need to agree on that.
Please
and-
don't do this of all the options.
Exactly. And then there are some gray areas, but what do you use as a basis to make those decisions? That's where we come back to things like the ACS, the Australian Computer Society Code of Ethics, the Engineering Australia Code of Ethics, the IEEE Software Engineering Code of Ethics. So, when we have all of these code of ethics, but it's only when we put those things to concrete scenarios that students start to really think about it.
Yeah.
So that was quite an interesting kind of workshop
Yeah,
experience.
okay. And you run that with first year students?
This is second years,
Second year, okay.
and this particular unit is about software engineering process and management.
Okay.
And week 3, meaning quite early on, before they start their project, we want them thinking about ethics.
Yeah, thinking about this before they start doing the things. So
Absolutely.
Hopefully they'll implement it as they are.
Absolutely, because like we know, unfortunately, from Oppenheimer, ethics cannot be retrofitted, right?
No.
Once it's done, it's done.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's really interesting. So is this a problem that is? This sounds like it's an industry-wide problem. It's
Yep.
not like a specific chat GPT.
Yeah.
Like you would presumably get this problem occurring. all over the place. Do you feel like it's something that's gotten better over time, or we just haven't really made enough progress to say that? Like compared to 15 years ago, are people more ethically aware now?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think the question of ethics is certainly being asked more now because of the advent of things like generative AI. We are seeing a whole new generation of artificial intelligence that is not just when you search Google, it presents information that already exists.
Yeah, this is why the
This is
writers are on strike in America at the moment, right?
Precisely. So now more than ever, we're talking about what it means to be human, what it means to be ethical, and so we really need to kind of ramp up on the education front as well, because the people walking out tomorrow and acting as the engineers of tomorrow need to have the ethics at the heart of it, right? And so one of the analogies I often use will be like, they're all smart cookies.
Yeah.
Like their minds, no problem. The brains, no problem. They need to
making
have
their
the
hearts
hearts
in the
in the
right
right
spot.
place. Exactly. So it's the heart and mind combination that, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That's really interesting. It was interesting you saying like it's hard to teach ethics sometimes because people switch off. Like I had the same problem with first year scientists, like science students. Like how do I make this interesting for them so that they're not just going to like switch off?
Exactly. Exactly.
Uh,
And oftentimes there's just loads and loads of text and text and text. Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, clause number 4.2 point that.
Yeah, like almost every company and every university's got like ethics clauses in your or
Yeah.
associations got ethics clauses. How often like I couldn't tell you what's in RMIT's ethics guides.
Right.
Like I remember looking them up when it started, but
Yeah.
I don't remember them.
And that's why, again, with things like ethics, the training needs to be repeated every so often because we're human, we forget.
Yeah.
Or
so
we-
ideally you would see this being like a once a year thing where people just have like a refresher, like, hey, just remember,
Yeah,
don't be meanie. It's a very simplified way of looking at it.
yeah, and it's the like the broad brushed black and white that's easy. It's all the gray in between where you need help, right? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you for that. That was
No,
really interesting.
thank you.
It's definitely given me a perspective to think of when I'm working, like using ChatGPT at work.
Yeah, yeah. There's
I'm gonna
also
have to
Llama
investigate
2, by
this
the way.
temperature thing.
Yeah, and there's also Llama 2, by the way. So
Llama
double
2.
L-A-M-A, Llama.
Okay.
And the advantage with Llama is you can download it to your computer. So
Ah.
your data isn't
Stays-
going
it's
somewhere
going-
else.
Not being fed back up.
Exactly. You'll probably need a bit more memory, but a lot more memory. But
Yeah, okay.
but because obviously ChatGPT is on the cloud, so don't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
But
you
you
don't
know
have any control once the data leaves the
exactly,
system.
exactly.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.